Hello, everybody, and welcome into Texas Longhorns Live number 89. We really appreciate you guys being here. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. And as always, we are brought to you by FanDuel, and we're just going to kick it off with this. Texas sitting at plus 700 odds to win the national championship. If you like those odds, go over to FanDuel and bet it. Notre Dame, the favorite at plus 650. Texas is tied with Ohio State and Indiana at plus 700 as well. So kind of surprising to me. Tommy, does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, I think when you get this far from the season, it's always really hard to get a beat on what each team is going to be. As I've kind of slowly gotten into what these teams are going to look like, it feels like Texas, Notre Dame, and Oregon are kind of having these all-in type seasons in 2026. So all of them toward the top. I think Oregon right behind that kind of foursome we have at the top. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame looks like a great team going into next year. Indiana will be the big time question, and actually is something we'll talk about in that first segment here.
Yeah, for sure. So again, guys, go over to FanDuel and check that out. And again, it does lead right into our first segment. So Josh Pate decided to rank the top 10 programs right now, and I thought this would be interesting to go over. So I'll run down the list really quick. Ohio State is 1, Georgia is 2, Indiana is 3, Oregon is 4, and Texas is 5. Rounding it out, 6 is Notre Dame, 7 is Bama, 8 is Miami, 9 is A&M, and 10 is Michigan. That one kind of surprised me, but then again, when you get in that 9-10 spot, it's kind of, you're kind of just searching. It's kind of pick your flavor there. So, Tommy, what sticks out to you about like where Texas is ranked 1? And then do you think there's anyone that's on the list that shouldn't be, I guess?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because first, Ohio State and Georgia pretty confidently 1 and 2, right? I think everyone in the college football world can agree those two have kind of been clear of the pack, and he uses a 3-year kind of running sample size. You could go 5 years. People have different philosophies on that, but I think those two kind of stand alone. I think everyone relatively agrees there. Indiana at 3 is the interesting one, right? It's the one that people still are getting pretty accustomed to Indiana being that high in the rankings, but coming off a national title, I tend to believe it's a different program once Kurt Signetti takes over. So it's essentially a 2-year sample size you're working with there. Don't have a huge problem with that. Then you get into the three that I think are right with each other. I think Oregon, Texas, Notre Dame are roughly around the same neighborhood. You have Oregon with both Oregon and Texas have a conference championship in the past 3 years. Notre Dame, obviously, the trip to the national title, kind of being the best of the bunch there. But all of those seem to be on relatively even footing. I could see the argument of Oregon above Texas here. I think with the certainty at quarterback they've had year over year, being able to get a guy like Dante Moore to sit behind Dylan Gabriel for a year, and then Dylan Raiola expected to do that this year. So I understand the argument there, and you have 3 teams there that I think you're just splitting hairs. So overall, I think 5 is okay. I think that's a solid place to be. You could argue 4 or even 3, depending on the way you look at this, but I think it's totally fair to have Texas around 5. In terms of teams that I'm a little bit surprised are on there, I think, yeah, Michigan, Texas Tech, and Tennessee, those last 3 teams now 10, 11, and 12, like we talked about, kind of a gray area once you get to ranking these programs, but a lot of really good programs. I think Oklahoma is still kind of in that mix of, are they an elite program? Are they taking a step back over the next couple of years? You have a program like Washington that has been a little bit quiet, but has been really, really consistent, has that national title run with Kayla Nabor not too long ago. So there's a lot that could go in that kind of, 8 through, or really 9 through 15 range. I think it's a little bit hairy, but these top 8 feel pretty solid to me. It's just kind of the way you want to order them, really.
Yeah, I would have had Texas above Oregon because, I mean, I think they've done better in big-time games than Oregon has. For the most part, Oregon's kind of gotten blown out in the playoff when they get there and get to the Final Four. I mean, they got blown out versus Indiana. They got blown out versus Ohio State, and that was before the Final Four. And then we saw what Texas did to that same Ohio State team. It was, one play away from being tied and going into overtime. So I think Texas should be above Oregon, but again, I'm not going to fight too hard on that. And the logic there is kind of weird to me because if you do have Oregon above Texas, I think you have to have Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame made a national championship game 2 years ago and performed very well this year. So I think, if you're going to have Oregon, you might as well just put Notre Dame in front. as well. I do think Texas should be 4. And then Bama to me at 7 is odd. I think they should be lower, actually. I think Miami should be above Alabama. I think if this is Nick Saban coaching Alabama, I'd be perfectly fine with this ranking. But this is Kalen DeBoer, and Kalen DeBoer really hasn't done anything at Alabama. He has one playoff win versus an Oklahoma team that, let's be honest here, was probably one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the field. I don't think they were that good, especially offensively. They were horrid. And then they got absolutely skull-tracked the next week by Indiana. I mean, that game was over after the first quarter. So I think I would switch Miami and Alabama. Mario Cristobal, like game day, when game day rolls around, I'll give you Kalen DeBoer is better. But I think at assembling the roster in this modern day of college football, I think the roster has been assembled better at Miami the past couple of years. I think you can argue that.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think that's an interesting. It's kind of like what we were talking about with Indiana. You could really only take the Kalen DeBoer era as what they are as a program moving forward. And if we're looking forward, I definitely take where Miami is compared to where Alabama is. Some of that's conference based, and some of that's just the reality of what Alabama has to deal with being in the SEC and recruiting who they have to recruit against. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really tough fight for Kalen DeBoer to get back into it. The Indiana thing, just to go back to that for a second, we talked about it's a 2-year sample size that they're working with. I think 2026 is going to be really telling. And I think it always was going to be really telling. Obviously, 2025 told us plenty about what Kurt Cignetti can do over there, but Aiden Fisher out the door, D'Angelo Pons out the door, Elijah Surratt out the door. A lot of these guys that kind of defined what you were off the field, not just on the field, but kind of defined the work ethic around that program. You lose all those guys. Now, I fully expect them to pass with flying colors and Josh Hoover to be a great player because I shouldn't expect anything different. But at the end of the day, that'll be an interesting thing to watch. But I'm with you on Alabama. I think it's a program that, at least right now, just feels a little bit stuck in neutral. And as you look at their roster going into 2026, it looks like a roster that's built for 2027. It looks like a lot of young kids that have the ability to continue to grow and to maybe pop in 2027, but probably aren't all the way there in 2026. So I tend to believe they're not, below Miami right now, which I probably would have them. I tend to believe they will be in about 12 months.
Yeah, and I think this hurts to say, but I think A&M, you could make the argument, is on a better trajectory right now than Alabama. And I honestly think Texas Tech, I didn't read the 11 and 12. I believe Texas Tech was 11. Texas Tech should have been higher on this list because especially like you said with Indiana and Miami, you have to take in the conference into account. Like Texas Tech spends 5 times as much money as anyone else in the Big 12. So I think they should be higher. Like I personally would probably have them right under Notre Dame. I'd have them at 7 just because the conference they play in and the amount of money they spend. I mean, it's not close, guys. It's like a Major League Baseball team playing against AAA teams. That's really what it's like. That's why they're going to roll through their conference, and then it's going to be interesting once they get to the playoff game. That will tell you everything you need to know because you don't know how good that football team is because, again, they're not playing like-on-like competition at all.
Yeah, no, that's the interesting one where if you're looking forward, I'm right there with you. I think they're at least top 8 to top 10 in the country because you got all the money in the world, you got all the resources, and you just happen to be smack dab in the middle of the most talent-rich state in the country. So even when you're competing with Texas and A&M and all these other teams for in-state recruits, there's plenty to go around in the state of Texas. So I think that makes a huge difference. I think this year in the Big 12, we'll see what Oklahoma State can bring. I think that's going to be the team that has a chance to challenge. Maybe BYU continues to push money into football and all athletics seemingly and continue to make that leap. There's a lot of teams that maybe they can't quite do Texas Tech money, but they can probably do a touch under that and then maybe try to beat them out in other ways. But I'm right there with you. I think given the conference, given the way that they spend comparative to everyone else in their conference, it's a weird team every single year because you don't quite know what you're getting until you get to that December game, possibly. But at the end of the day, it's a really, really great program that continues to be in a great spot with a coach that I fully believe in moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. Guys, let us know if you think Texas, the 5 ranking is fair for Texas in the comments. If not, let us know where you think they should be ranked. I think it's kind of hard to argue anything past 4. I don't think you can argue against Ohio State, Georgia, or Indiana. I mean, those are the teams that have won a national championship in the past, 5 to 6 years. And then they've also kept the majority of that coaching staff that's important to them. Whereas that's why Michigan's at 10. I mean, that's a whole different team than we're talking about that won the national championship. So again, guys, let us know down in the comments what you think about that. Let's jump over to this. Who will be the backup quarterback to Arch Manning? I think this is a super interesting question because, you bring in MJ Morris kind of in that Matthew Caldwell mold. Is he going to be Matthew Caldwell where he becomes the backup? I said on this channel, I would be shocked if Matthew Caldwell ever played for Texas because I didn't think he'd even win the backup job last year. Well, guess what? I was wrong. He won the backup job. He threw a very important pass in the overtime versus Mississippi State. So we'll have to see about MJ Morris. But Tommy, who do you think week 1, who will be listed as the backup quarterback for Texas in your opinion?
Yeah, the way you said that is very important. Who it's going to be in week 1, I think it's going to be KJ Lacey. I think he's the most confident in the offense. I think he's had the most time to get comfortable, taking those backup reps behind Arch. And the funny thing about this spring is it's going to be a relatively open conversation because Arch just had surgery on his foot. We don't know how much he's going to be on the field. I think he'll be more than fine once he really has to be. But at the end of the day, this is a chance for all 3 of these guys to get a shot at this job. And I think it could be KJ Lacey week 1. I think it could be Diabell by the end of the season. So I think it's an interesting conversation. In terms of MJ Morris, he's very different from Matthew Caldwell just in terms of the type of player he is. A lot more of that athlete, a lot more relying on his legs, but still a guy that can make some of those big time passes. So I think he has a shot to win this job. To me, it was in addition to just make sure the KJ Lacey thing wasn't you're falling off a cliff from Arch Manning to the second string, because that's the big time question, right? It's not necessarily who's trotting out there. It's how confident is the coaching staff while that guy's trotting out there and Arch Manning has to come off the field, because we know how Arch Manning plays. He's probably going to have a couple of snaps where he stands on the sideline and someone comes in and maybe makes a Matthew Caldwell type throw. I lean towards KJ Lacey being that guy, at least early on. And then the Diabell conversation is really interesting. Will he be ready to play early on? Could he be the backup by the end of the season? And the new redshirt rules that essentially let you play a whole season and not have a problem, you might as well have that guy wherever he fits in. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch. KJ Lacey not winning the job last year makes me feel a little bit more worried about him winning it this time around, but I think he's better. I think the competition is a little bit less so, and I think he definitely will be the backup, at least for week 1, and then we'll see what happens from there.
I'm going to go with MJ Morris just because I think they value experience a lot. I think it could be one of those things where MJ Morris, like if it's a big game, comes in. But if, again, Texas State, when we're blowing them out, it won't shock me if it's KJ Lacey. I think that would actually make more sense because you know what you're getting with MJ Morris. You really don't have any idea when the live bullets are flying, what you're getting with KJ Lacey or Diabell. So you want them in those type of games. But I don't want this to happen. But if week 2, someone gets, if Arch gets hurt versus Ohio State, I think MJ Morris would probably be the most likely guy just because I'm trying to learn from my mistake last year. I thought KJ Lacey and the talented guys behind Arch would get the chance, but I think they just like Matthew Caldwell's experience and then the capability of running the offense at, an average level. I don't think they need anything great for a game or two. Now, if this is a whole season injury, I think that also changes, the math on that as well. But I think if you're just talking one game, one half, one quarter, I think MJ Morris would probably be the backup. And I think you bringing up that redshirt rule is very important, guys. If you don't know, it's 9 games now, which is crazy. Like you said, Tommy, that's the whole year. You can basically play the whole year and keep your redshirt, which at this point, I'm fine with. Like, it should just be 4 years to play, or you get 5 years to play 4 anyways. That's how this should go. I don't know why it's taken this long. Eventually, I think we will get there. But just like everything the NCAA does, they drag their feet and make this thing go, well, a lot longer than it should. But I agree. I think at the end of the year, it's going to be KJ Lacey or Diabell. But again, if it's early in the year, you need him for a half. I think it's going to be MJ Morris.
Yeah, I get that. And I think the interesting thing here as well, we talked about, Morris being a little bit more of that run first type player. If the run game isn't rolling early in the season and then Arch goes out, you're thinking we probably need those legs. We probably need the extra numbers for that defense to think about. So that could be another factor here. I think at very worst, I think he's a great person to have on a practice squad playing your first defense because he looks a whole lot like what Marcel Reed and John Mateer and some of these more mobile quarterbacks are going to look like throughout the season. So I think he's a great pickup, regardless if he's backup, third string, practice squad guy, wherever he fits onto this roster. I think he's a very, very solid pickup. I think the point about just experience and comfortability when those live bullets are flying is a very real thing. So it could be MJ Morris, in the first 4 games, then KJ Lacey finds his way and starts, maybe he's the backup for 4 games, and then Diabell finds his footing and he's the most talented guy on the roster and he ends up being the backup. So it could be kind of a rotating door. As long as Arch Manning's on the field, I think you're in really good shape. You just got to hope that the drop off from Arch Manning to whoever the backup is not cataclysmic, because then you got a big problem. And it really wasn't a year ago. Now, we didn't see a lot of Matthew Caldwell, but when we did, he came in through very confident football, and that's really all you need in a moment like this. I totally understand why you think MJ Morris would be at least, those short-term option if he needed to get in there quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember when Arch got hurt versus Mississippi State. We played Vanderbilt the next week, and there were some people in the fan base, and I'm not going to say what I want to say about him, but they were saying some pretty crazy things of Matthew Caldwell would be the better option this game. And I'm just like, okay, no, for a play or two, for a couple handful of plays, it's completely different than a team is strategizing to take you out of the football game and what your strengths and weaknesses are and all that. So that was crazy to me. We definitely need to keep Arch as healthy as possible. Again, I was a big proponent of, in the big time games, those Ohio States, when we play Ole Miss, when we play Tennessee, when we play LSU, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, so like 6 big games, you want to give him 8 to 10 carries in those games, fine. But if there's any design runs versus Texas State, like, what are we doing? That should be bombing away and running with the running backs. You don't need to be running Arch Manning in those games.
Yeah, and I think the kind of weird curveball that could come from this quarterback group, because it's a really interesting group. You have 2 young guys in KJ Lacey and Diabell that I think Longhorn fans would love to see battling it out for the starting position in 2027. And then you have a kid in MJ Morris where if there's a world where Arch Manning gets hurt, or even when he's on the football field, a 2 quarterback set could be really interesting with that guy, where you have both those guys out there. You have a lot of optionality, and obviously you don't want to do it a lot. You don't want to, do anything too crazy, but there's a play or two that you could kind of polish off and use MJ Morris for, and maybe just be that little bit different on Saturday than you were a year ago with a guy like Matthew Caldwell and then KJ Lacey. Neither of those guys gave you what MJ Morris will. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. Wouldn't be surprised if we never saw that, but it's an option this year going into it.
No, I think that's fair. And I think the point you made about practice squad quarterbacks fair too, because we play a lot of, mobile quarterbacks this year with Trinidad Chambliss. Sam Levitt's a guy that obviously can run around. And then among others, John Mateer and Marcel Reed. So, 4 guys on the schedule that can run around, and Josh Simmons at Missouri can run around a little bit. So I think he provides, like you said, that practice squad look, and it's going to be interesting. And I think this is like keep your eye on this in the spring game type thing. Like, how does MJ Morris look? How does KJ Lacey look? How does Diabell look? I think we know how the starters are going to look, but looking at these key backup positions is what's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and we know Arch is not going to touch the field on that day. I don't think he'll put on pads that day. He'll sign a lot of autographs. He'll do that whole thing. But at the end of the day, you'll see those 3 quarterbacks, and it might just be an open tryout. It might just be, this is how we're going to go into the summer. You'll decide how you guys stack up. And then when we get into fall camp, maybe we can have some more conversations. But that's going to be a huge day, and the 5 weeks or so leading up to it are going to be massive.
No, I think that's fair. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know who you think will be the backup quarterback week 1. I have MJ Morris. He has KJ Lacey. I'd be really surprised if it's Diabell. Like, I give him 1% chance in this. Then I think you're split.
At least to start the season.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, week 1, 100%. I'd be surprised. It wouldn't shock me if we're talking week 12 if he's the backup quarterback. But week 1, I'd be surprised. Let's jump into these comments. David Keith Williams. I have read it and heard multiple comments about Debo needing an entire season to physically recover. Yes, from the previous 2 years of injuries he's suffered as a junior and senior in high school. Yeah, he had a really bad leg injury. I believe his junior year, barely played his senior year, I believe. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, played about 4 or 5 games, I think, his senior year. So it makes sense to me. And I think you bring in a guy like MJ Morris just to push that down the road just a little bit further, I think that's going to be the guy in 2027, but you want to make sure he's as healthy as possible when he does have to get on the field. So would totally understand. And I think you just bought yourself another buffer with MJ Morris there.
And then also considering the reported improvements that KJ Lacey made as a true freshman, specifically overtaking Trey Moore, but I know what you mean, Trey Owens. I don't expect Diabell to usurp Lacey, regardless how good his health may be. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting, but I like KJ Lacey. I think he's a good quarterback. I just think Diabell has something when you watch him. I think he's more just ready-made for the college game and specifically Sark's offense than KJ Lacey. But, that extra year is going to help him a lot in that quarterback battle for 2027.
Yeah, and there's a fundamental difference between playing your high school football at American Heritage and playing it at Saraland High School. Both really good football teams, both play great competition, but American Heritage is about as high school football as you'll find in the country. So Diabell is just going to be a little bit further along in his freshman year than KJ Lacey was. I do think KJ Lacey is probably a little further along right now than Diabell is. So we'll see how it shakes out throughout the season. And then hopefully in 2027, we have these two guys going at it for that starting spot.
We're talking about quarterbacks. We might as well stay on other quarterbacks, not Texas quarterbacks. The top 5 quarterbacks Texas will face next year. Tommy, I will let you start off first. Who is your number 5 quarterback Texas will face next year?
Is John Mateer. And I went through this list a couple of different times. I think we have to have the same 5 guys. There's one guy that's still in court that hypothetically could factor into this list. I think I would have him at 6, but at the end of the day, John Mateer at 5. I don't fully buy into John Mateer. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a talented kid. He's heading into his 4th year in the Ben Arbuckle system, his 3rd as a starter. And he still has the same issues. He still has the weird mechanics. He still has the things where, for some reason, just can't keep his feet on the ground when he throws the football, and he will sail it from time to time. So his physical ability is the reason why he's here. He obviously can run the football really effectively. He can make some of those wow throws that we have seen. But when you look across the Texas schedule, it's not loaded with elite quarterbacks. I do think John Mateer's physical ability kind of gets him on this list at 5.
Yeah, so I have Mateer / Aguilar, the guy you were mentioning in court for Tennessee. That's, we'll see if he gets his eligibility. I would be surprised if he doesn't. Like the NCAA,
you're number 8,
these
so
cases. Yeah, I would have Joey Aguilar above John Mateer, but I'll have John Mateer here for number 5 because again, we don't know. I completely agree with what you said. I've never liked John Mateer. When you look at the stats, when he transferred over from Oklahoma versus good competition, which was only like 3 games, his completion percentage was like 58% or something like that versus the competition. He's never been an accurate quarterback. He makes really bad decisions versus good competition. You saw that versus Texas with the 3 interceptions. Yeah, his hands hurt. I don't think that causes you to throw into double and triple coverage all the time. I think that's definitely more of what you're seeing with your eyes. Do I agree that probably played into his deep ball? Yeah, because he was a little bit better earlier in the year throwing the deep ball, but there wasn't a big drop-off, guys. He's just not, a great quarterback. He's okay. And he needs a lot of help around him for, if you're going to want to win a national championship. He's not one of those guys, they talk about if you're a trailer or a truck, where a truck can, carry the trailer along, or you can jump in the trailer and ride along with the truck. I think he's a trailer. I don't think he's a truck. So yeah. I'm at number 5.
Yeah, and there's at least one truck on this list, and he's at the top for me, but we'll get there in time.
Number 4 for me is Marcel Reed. I've always, I think, been a little bit higher on Marcel Reed than most Texas fans or even just like national college football people. I think Marcel Reed is a good football player. I still, again, his issue is reading defenses, but the difference with him is he actually can make some throws from the pocket once in a while, where John Mateer, honestly, there's very few plays I watch and that are good from John Mateer that are in the pocket. It's all outside the pocket for John Mateer. Once in a while, Marcel Reed will make a couple plays from the pocket. Still got to get better at reading defenses. We'll see how he does under Holman Wiggins. I think Colin Klein, that scheme does fit Marcel Reed, but it also puts him in a box and doesn't allow him to grow as a quarterback, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting if he's going to be able to grow under Holman Wiggins.
Yeah, that's the big kind of question 4 as well. He fits right in there. So I really like him. I think he's a coach's son, so he's one of those guys that's just addicted to football. He's going to continue to try to work on all the things that you do have questions about. The accuracy, reading defenses at times, just being confident and smart with the football at different times throughout the game. But yeah, the OC change is going to be the biggest question because love what Colin Klein did with that offense in so many different ways, especially in the run game. But you are right. It does kind of keep quarterbacks from being as special as they could be. I think Will Howard is the perfect example of this. He goes from Kansas State over to Ohio State. They let him rip the ball down the field just a little bit more. He has one of the more special runs that we've seen in college football. So I do think it's one of those things where could go very right, could go very wrong. And Holman Wiggins is a new play caller, a lot of new things. So it'll be really interesting to watch. I have all the confidence in the world that Marcel Reed will be better than he was a year ago. How much better will make the difference between A&M making a playoff and beating Texas or falling short on both those things again.
Was he also your number 4, or do you have number 4?
Yeah, he fit in at number 4 as well.
Okay, who's your number 3?
Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt's one of those guys, and we talked about Brooks Austin last week, I believe, and I think he put it best. He's a frantic playmaker. He is all over the place at times, and I think we saw that in the Peach Bowl about 10 minutes down the road from me. The kid was all over the place. Now, he didn't get sacked a couple of different times when he very well should have, but at the end of the day, he's going to make some of those special plays. He's a really, really good athlete. He has a strong arm downfield. He's able to negate some of that pass rush that Texas kind of kept them in games throughout this season and probably will going into next season. So you go into LSU, you're probably going to play at night because that's just the way things work. And you're playing a guy that you catch him on the wrong night, he could go for 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and be the best player on the football field. So a little all over the place, a little bit up and down, but he can pop at any moment. And now he has a coordinator that can kind of just channel some of that playmaking into being a little bit less frantic.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, I mean, his main concern is health. He's always had health issues, and especially back. I think that's why, LSU went and got 2 guys from the portal, one from Elon and then Hudson Longstreet from USC as well. So it's going to be interesting. I think Sam Leavitt I have him as 3 as well. I think he's John Mateer on steroids. I just think he's able to make more plays because he's a better athlete than John Mateer. And I think he's a little bit more accurate just in the intermediate and short game than John Mateer is. Deep ball, I'd say they're about the same from what I've seen. I don't think Sam Leavitt's some amazing deep ball passer. But it's going to be interesting with Lane Kiffin because Lane Kiffin will get the best out of him, and he's going to look very interesting in this offense. I think he could be a slightly worse version of Jackson Dart. I don't think he's quite that good because I think Jackson Dart is like a special athlete. We saw that in the NFL when he's able to run away from NFL players. I don't think Sam Leavitt's that. Maybe he is. He could prove me wrong and be that. So I have him at number 3. My number 2 is Julian Sayin. So I think people might be able to guess now who I have at number 1, but Julian Sayin's number 2 for me. Yeah, everything about Julian Sayin I like until he faces pressure. He crumbles anytime there's anyone near him, and it does not look good. It's not pretty. He looks scared. It causes turnovers. He either takes sacks he shouldn't. And we kind of saw him get lucky just throughout the year because he really didn't face anyone throughout the year, guys. You face Texas, and he's getting the ball really quick, just knowing his first read. And I don't think Texas did a good job of taking away his first read because if they made him actually read the defense and hold on the ball longer, I think that game probably turns out differently. They didn't do that. That's on the Texas coaching staff. But you saw that throughout the year when they played Indiana. Indiana did, and he got sacked a bunch, and he looked scared. When they played Miami, same thing happened. He got sacked a bunch. He looked scared. He's going to have to improve on reading what he sees, trusting what he sees, and ripping the football, and also stepping up in pockets. He does not do that in a dirty pocket. It's a lot of the great throws he has are off his back foot, which he can get away with because he's got a really good arm. But it's just like that last step for me that he's got to get a lot better at. So I actually think there's a bigger gap between 1 and 2 than 2 and 3 for me. And we'll get to my 1 in a minute. But Tommy, who is your number 2?
I'm right there with you. I got Julian Sayin at my number 2. There was a pretty heavy shift around the fan narrative, at the very least, around him late in the season. 2 very tough performances against 2 incredible defenses, of course. But at the end of the day, really, really accurate. Can get the ball out of his hands incredibly quickly. We need want him to go through those full reads a little bit better, but also sneaky athletic. When he really needed to pull the ball down, he made a couple of plays with his legs a year ago. So Texas got the last season. They're going to get him in full-fledged in week 2 this upcoming season. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what he ends up being. But I am there kind of with you. He's one of those guys that when we were starting the season a year ago, I'm sitting there thinking this can be the most special thrower of the football at Ohio State since CJ Stroud. This is going to be the guy that can totally take the top off of every defense, can terrify every defense that he plays, and even against a elite defense like CJ Stroud did to Georgia in 2021, I guess it would have been, just tore them to pieces. The big thing with CJ Stroud was he was elite at pocket management. He was elite at stepping up and getting away when he needed to. Julian Sain can make that last little jump. I think he could be in New York City and very well win that trophy at the end of the year. So I'm big on Julian Sain. It'll come down to the offensive line and offensive coordinator, as it often does with a lot of these, not as mobile quarterbacks. But he's one of those guys that I think the sky's the limit as long as the offensive line works out in front of him.
No, I agree. It's going to be interesting how he progresses this year. Number one, obviously, we both have him, is Trinidad Chambliss. I just think he's able to do basically everything well. I don't think there's anything I look at and think, man, he needs to improve a lot here. Can he get better all around? Yeah, but he's just good at everything. I'd give him like a B plus on everything he does. He's really good inside the pocket. He's really good outside the pocket. I think at the latter half of the year, he got really good at, it was kind of the opposite where Julian Sain down the stretch kind of melted under pressure. You saw this guy getting hit big time by Georgia defenders and then going, 14 of 14 or 15 of 15 in a row at one point in the second half. And they weren't checkdowns. This guy's bombing away while getting blasted, and he's completing these passes. He's rolling left, throwing back right, rolling right, throwing back left. And he's doing everything. And he's the one guy to me where if you get him on the wrong day versus anyone, he could have a 400-yard game, 5 touchdowns, and beat you by himself. Does he have that gunslinger mentality a little bit too much to where, hey, one day he could probably have 1 touchdown, 3 or 4 interceptions? I think that could happen to him, but I think that's going to happen to him maybe one time next year. I think he's too talented to be kept down like that for multiple games.
Yeah, he's the only quarterback on this list that I entertain taking before Arch Manning. I think Julian Sain's in that conversation, but he's such an elite playmaker. He's quick and elite decision maker in a number of different ways. He does the same thing that Sam Leavitt kind of does with negating some of that pass rush with his ability to kind of rush and make plays off schedule, make plays that normal people shouldn't even think about making, but he finds a way to do it. He's one of those guys that, yeah, we talked about with Sam Leavitt, a frantic playmaker. You take the word frantic away from that with Trinidad Chambliss. Very calm, very confident, and one of those guys that even if you catch him on his B+ day, he's still going to play really, really good football, and he's going to make plays. So when they take that trip to Ole Miss and they have to play that big-time game, you're just going to have to live with some of those big-time plays that he's going to make, and you're going to have to be able to counterpunch. But it definitely made that game a whole lot tougher. Happy to have a great player back in college football, but at the end of the day, he is definitely going to be the toughest challenge when it comes to quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think if he doesn't come back, he can just chalk that up as a win. I would have been shocked if Texas doesn't win that game versus Ole Miss without him. With him, it's going to be really
Deuce
hard.
Knight. I like Deuce Knight, but he's not quite there yet.
No. So it's going to be interesting. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know your top 5 quarterbacks Texas will face next year. We really appreciate you guys doing that. Let's go over to the running back room. When we talked about the quarterbacks and who the backup quarterback will be, there is a debate here. Who is going to start for Texas? How is this running back room going to play out? Tommy, obviously this isn't going to be 80% carries to 20% carries, but I think it's going to be 55, 45, 60, 40 between these two backs. Who do you think gets the majority of carries, Hollywood Smothers or Raleek Brown?
I'll lean towards Hollywood Smothers. I think it could be kind of that situation. We talked about it with the wide receiver group where maybe Emmett Mosley leads in receptions, but Cam Coleman or Ryan Wingo leads in yards. Could be kind of the same conversation here. Smothers leads in touches, but Raleek Brown has more of those pop plays and makes some of those, 60-yard runs or 70-yard runs. So I tend to believe Hollywood Smothers is more of your down-to-down back. I think he's a little bit more solid in pass protection. Neither of them are downright elite, but I do think he's a little bit stronger than Raleek Brown is. I tend to believe he gets, 55%, 53% of the carries. I think it's going to be a very, very even split between the two. But if I had to lean one direction, I'll lean towards Holly Smothers by a hair.
No, I agree. I think Hollywood Smothers is more your keep it on track back, 5, 6, 4 yards per carry, just consistent, does his job the right way. But it wouldn't shock me if he has more carries but less yards, because I think Relief Brown has that home run hitter potential where you give him one and he's out the gate. A lot like if you go back and watch Jaden Blue versus Clemson, little outside zone, he takes it 70, 75 yards. I think that could be Relief Brown. I don't think Hollywood Smothers, he does have some of that, but he's not, to me, as has that burst that Relief Brown has. So I agree. I think Hollywood Smothers is going to lead the team in carries. I don't know about yards though, because again, if you go total yards too, Relief Brown is probably better out of the backfield pass catching as well. So it's going to be interesting with that. And how do you think Relief Brown will be used though?
That's the interesting question. I think it can almost be kind of that hybrid between what you do with Ryan Niblett out of the backfield and what you did with Jaden Blue, where you have a lot of those outside zone stretch carries like you did with Jaden Blue, where he has to make one cut and then he can find his way to the second level and then do something special. And then you can do that Ryan Niblett, you have that throwback screen. They love to play where Arch fakes out to one side, you throw it back to the other. If Relief Brown's waiting there, that's essentially a kick return and something that he's very comfortable doing. He was the punt returner for Arizona State. Have to imagine he won't be for Texas, but at the end of the day, you can still put him in some of those situations. So it's kind of one of those hybrid roles where he's going to be a running back. He's going to be in the backfield 99% of the time, but you can use him as essentially another wide receiver out there at certain times. And I think you can use both these running backs a lot of the time when you want to get a little bit more dynamic in what you're play calling.
Yeah, I think you're going to see like a Keelan Robinson, Jaden Blue type mixture with a lot of passes out of the backfield, a lot of weird formations to get him one-on-one with the safety or linebacker. We saw that with Ohio State when we scored the 2 touchdowns. It was Jaden Blue on a linebacker, and they can't cover him. I think you're going to see that with Relief Brown a lot too, and I think it should be used more. I think that's one of the things I get on Sark about. You had Bijan Robinson, who was a really good pass catcher. I don't think he was used enough in that role. I don't think Jaden Blue was used enough in that role, because let's be honest here, Jaden Blue had fumbling issues when you hand him the ball. But if you're throwing him the football and he's running by people, guess what? If no one touches him, he can't fumble the football. His issue is once people get his hands on him, that they could force fumbles. But if you have him out in the passing game, if they're behind him, it's probably over because he runs a 4.3. So you're not going to catch him anyway. So I think he should be used more there. The next 4 guys, you have Derek Cooper coming in as a freshman, James Simon as a redshirt freshman, Jet Walker as a freshman, and Michael Terry. I'm going to hit on this first. I think Michael Terry in the running back room is a travesty, guys. I do not like him as a running back. I think he is way too stiff in the lower body to be a running back. I think he's a tight end. I think he would be a fantastic tight end. So I don't like him there. Do you have an opinion on that, Tommy?
It's such an interesting case because I don't exactly know where you put him. Obviously, you could place him at tight end. He could be an interesting choice down the road. But when you get into 2026, there's only so many spots to place this kid right now. So I think running back's a choice. Every time you see him carry the ball, whether it's in practice or otherwise, seems to be rather high pads when he's running the football. And that's natural for a guy that got away with a lot of just raw athleticism because he is an athletic freak. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine he factors much into what you're going to do at running back this season. If he does, then either he absolutely popped and figured a lot of things out, or you have some problems in the running back room that you have to figure out. But long term, he's one of those athletes that you'd hate to see go by the wayside, but it's also one of those things where this roster continues to take shape, and I'm trying to find placement for Michael Terry, and I can't quite find it. Maybe tight end moving forward, but that might be a tough fit as well. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. I have to imagine he doesn't factor too much into the running back room this year, though.
No, I agree. I would be surprised if he has more than 20 carries on the year. Like if he goes over that number, something bad probably happened. Like we had 2 running back injuries, honestly. So it's going to be interesting. Who do you think ends up being the third running back? Is it Derek Cooper? Is it James Simon? Can Jet Walker factor in for 2026 in that discussion, or do you just think it's Simon versus Cooper?
I think it's Simon versus Cooper. I'll lean Cooper, and it's not necessarily because I think Derek Cooper is going to be, infinitely further along than James Simon is. He's 210 pounds. He's 15 pounds bigger than the two starters that you're going to have. He's a little bit bigger than James Simon. James Simon around 200, 205. So sort of a wash there, but probably the more physical runner that you're going to have. And James Simon's kind of the curious case of this running back room. You don't really know what the future holds for this kid. I think it all kind of depends on what Hollywood Smothers and Malik Brown do at the end of the year. Will be draft eligible for 2027. If they have great years, you could see them walk out the door, and then it's Derek Cooper and James Simon in 2027. But for 2026, I think it's Derek Cooper. I think he's the guy that he could meet a linebacker at the line of scrimmage and then push him forward for 3 yards and get a first down. It might take a little bit more time. So maybe you see James Simon in the Ohio State game, and then you see Derek Cooper maybe in the Tennessee game and moving forward. But at the end of the day, I think for the majority of the season, at least, I think you're going to see Derek Cooper because whenever you turn this kid's tape on, it's just a little bit different than you've seen from other guys.
Yeah, and I just think he adds a different dynamic. You know, he's the power back, gets the hard earned yards. I think he's definitely more of that than Hollywood Smothers or Malik Brown. And James Simon isn't really that. He's more of, you know, a hybrid pass catcher out of the backfield with nice running in between the tackles, but there's nothing like, man, he's going to bulldoze someone to get an extra 2-3 yards. That's more Derek Cooper. So I think that's why he will be the third, you know, running back. It wouldn't shock me if James Simon is just a better running back next year, but because of the need of that type of back, that Derek Cooper is that third running back. And I'm going to say, because I'm a big fan of him, and it sucks he transferred. I love Christian Clark. I think Christian Clark's going to have a really big year at South Carolina, and it's going to hurt Texas fans if their offensive line is average at South Carolina, I think he's going to rush for 1,000 yards. I think that guy's a really special football player.
Yeah, no, I think he's really incredible. He's one of those guys that you felt like could be a casualty to all of the stuff that you knew was going to happen in the running back room, but definitely someone I would have loved to stick around. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be Derek Cooper. I think you brought up an interesting point. James Simon could be the better running back. That could factor in if you have a Hollywood Smothers injury or really, especially a Hollywood Smothers injury, probably just because he's really comfortable running that outside zone that they love to run so much. He's really comfortable in this Texas offense a little bit more so than a Derek Cooper. So maybe if Hollywood Smothers goes down and they don't feel fully confident of Malik Brown being that, 80-20 type running back one that maybe he was at Arizona State at times, I think James Simon could kind of fill that gap maybe as the RB2 and Derek Cooper stays as that power back option instead of kicking Derek Cooper up to RB2 and then James Simon filling in at RB3.
No, I agree with that. That's kind of like the same thing, I think, for quarterback. Like MJ Morris comes in early if you need him, but if you need someone for a whole season, I think KJ Lacey would be the deal. Whereas I think if you need someone as your third running back, it's Derek Cooper. But if someone gets hurt, Malik Brown or Hollywood Smothers, it wouldn't shock me if James Simon ends up being running back too in that situation.
Yeah, and I think he's a really talented kid. So I have very few doubts he would be able to put together a nice season. Maybe it's a Derek Cooper, James Simon going into 2027, and we feel great about it because James Simon flashed in 2026. So regardless, it's a really talented group. As long as they stay healthy, it should be a really consistent and well-rounded group, more so than a year ago.
Yeah, there's definitely more talent there. I think more explosive ability out of the backfield and all around just a better running back room overall. So again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know who starts at the running back position for Texas in 2026. And for the last portion of the show, the 3 biggest question marks for Texas heading into next year. Tommy, I will let you lead this one off. What is your number 3 question mark?
Yeah, so I have 3 different questions, all kind of getting a little bit bigger and more grandiose as we go down. The most simple one, can you keep Arch Manning out of the run game? It was the biggest question mark throughout the entirety of last season was, can you find a way to run the football when it's not Arch Manning finding a way to run the football? They didn't. Throughout the entirety of the season, if Arch Manning wasn't running the football effectively, this team wasn't running the football effectively. So you got to find a way to keep him out of it. Obviously, he's remarkably able with his legs. So you don't want to take that entirely out of your offense. You want to use it in short yardage, in the red zone, in certain areas where you feel like you can get one of those big 60-yard runs that he's capable of. But you got to be able to cherry pick those. It can't be the way that you run the football. It's got to be a play off the way you run the football, which is Malik Brown, Hollywood Smothers, the normal way to run the football, the way that we wish or we hope that they can get back to in 2026. So Manning's a really fearless player. That's the way he plays. He plays with his head down. He's going to go after guys. He's probably not going to slide quite as much as you would like him to. He's getting a little bit better at it, but at the end of the day, still has to work on it. You got to make sure this guy, he doesn't have to be the best passer and the best runner on the football team. I like to think they're in a much better spot, but you got to make sure that Arch Manning is not the way that you run the football in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he can run the football nearly as much as he did last year as like a design quarterback run. That got up into the 8 to 10 times per game in some of these games. And I agree you can do that in some of these bigger games. But again, on a week-to-week basis, you can't get away with that. That's not how you win national championships. He was leading Texas in rushing for the most part for most of the year. No team, unless it's Cam Newton, is going to win a national championship as the leading rusher plus the leading passer. And I don't even know if he did. Michael Dwyer might have beat him there, but if he did,
I don't know.
It's those type of guys, and just Arch Manning isn't that guy. And guess what? 99.9% of quarterbacks aren't that guy. So
Yeah,
I
no matter what Paul
agree with that.
Feinbaum will tell you.
Yeah. They do that for clicks. Completely agree with that. Number 3 for me is, can they get better in 12 personnel? This is something Sark loves to run. CJ Vogel of On Texas tweeted out like halfway through the year, when you did yards per play from 12 personnel, they were on point with Wisconsin from last year. Guys, Wisconsin was like the 125th best offense in the country. So if you're on par with Wisconsin in something you do 50+% of the time, you should probably change it up. That's another thing I got on Sark about, is why aren't we adjusting from this? He eventually did adjust more and we went 11 personnel, but we know he loves 12 personnel. Every year over year, he's running it about 50 to 60% of the time. So we have to be able to run the football specifically out of 12 personnel. If we can't run the football specifically out of 12 personnel, then one, I just need Sark to adjust, honestly, because I think if we just go to 11 personnel straight off the bat, this team will be fine. So maybe that's the thing too. Maybe we just don't even run 12 personnel as much, but it's hard for me to believe that Sark is just going to completely wipe away what he's done at Texas and not come out and at least start and try to establish 12 personnel. And if we do that, then we have to be good at it, because if not, that's going to cost us early in the season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think he's probably going to run it. He's been the guy that kind of leans on what he has until he doesn't have it. I think that only really happened after the Georgia game of this past season, when he really started towards 11 personnel. He's going to go 12 early, and I think you have the guys. I think we both agree that you have the tight ends to pull this off. You have the talent, both blocking and pass catching. I think you have the dudes to pull this off. It's got to fall on the offensive line, though. If you can't find a way to run in between the tackles in 12 personnel, where you're going to have more heavy boxes, then you're going to have to spread it out. You're going to have to play 11 personnel, and then I think you're kind of taking some of your best playmakers off the field with your tight ends. If you can't have Nick Townsend and Michael Masunas on the field at the same time, you're kind of leaving a little bit on the table. Now, you have plenty of playmakers, but at the end of the day, 12 personnel is where they're going to want to live. I think they have the tight ends to do it. They're going to have the offensive line to do it, and that'll be kind of the biggest difference maker. And can they run it? Can they run it effectively? If they have to go to 11, then so be it. I think Arch Manning can make the plays, but you also just don't want to have to put yourself in a position where every team coming into the game says they're not going to line up with 2 tight ends. And when they do, we can get after them and have no problem. So you're going to have to find a way to pull it off one way or the other, even if it's just you run it less often, but you're more efficient. That's plenty good. But he's going to run it. I think he has the tight ends too. Does he have the offensive line is the biggest question.
Yeah, I completely agree. What's your number 2?
It kind of off that Sark stuff that you were talking about. Can he find the middle ground? And this applies to a number of different areas. I'll start with the rotations. I think Sark loves to play his guys on the offensive side of the football, whether it's wide receivers or running backs. He doesn't do a ton of rotating. You're going to have to win 16 games. You might have to play 17. You got to be able to rotate these guys. And I think you have the guys to rotate in. Dalen McCutcheon, I expect to be a really good player this year. Khalil Lockett, I think will be ready. Sterling Burkholder, you bring in, really talented guy at the X position. I think you have the running backs, like we just talked about, to kind of rotate these guys more consistently. You got to be able to find the middle ground there. Play your guys, play Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, have them get those big-time touches, but let Khalil Lockett get 10 snaps a game, get 15 snaps a game, and get a couple of catches. Let some of those other guys get in the party. And then with the play calling, we talked about it last week, that all gas, no breaks type approach. That's all well and good until Quinn Ewers throws a ball way too deep down the field against Arizona State. It gets picked off, and then you're going to overtime when you probably shouldn't have. So you got to find the middle ground there. You got to know when you have to lean on the run, and then you got to be able to lean on the run, which is a big time question mark as we go into this season. But overall, it's a dance when you're talking about play calling. I think Sark has found himself maybe a little bit too stagnant at times, like we talked about with 12 personnel, or just a little bit too all over the place at times and trying to go for the kill shot when you don't quite need to. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch how he kind of finds the middle ground between the rotations, between the play calling, and then can he get this offensive line in the place that it needs to be? Can he make sure that everything else is in order while you're getting your game plans ready? Something that I think both of us have some worries about moving forward. We'll see if he can find the middle ground between being a play caller and being a head coach, and find a middle ground between rotations and play calling this year.
No, I think that's a really good point because, you're going to have to find out who these guys are, and it's better to find out early in their season through rotations, through 5 to 10 plays than, later in the season by need if someone gets hurt, like Cam Coleman gets hurt, and then you have to put in Khalil Lockett full time, and you're expecting 40 to 50 plays now from him. You don't even know what you have at that point if you've only been playing him 1 to 2 plays. So I agree, find 10 to 12 snaps for Dalen McCutcheon, Khalil Lockett every game. Of course, not key snaps too. Like that's the thing I don't understand. Some of these, like sneak them in 2nd and 7 on your own 45. You can put in Khalil Lockett and Dalen McCutcheon and see what happens there instead of, hey, 4th down and 1 inside your 20. You need the game. You need this to win the game. Obviously, you don't want him in that situation. So it's about finding, like you said, the middle ground. And then I agree. I think a lot of coaches struggle with this, just game flow in general. Yeah, analytics say one thing in this situation, but what does the game flow tell you? If it's a slugfest and it's 10 to 7 and points are at a premium, and you can kick the field goal, and it's only, it's a 25-yard field goal, and it's 4th and 1, and you could just sneak it and get a touchdown. But yeah, you could tie the game with the field goal, and which points out a premium. You should take the field goal, even though analytics will probably say go for it. Because guess what? Analytics don't take into account what is happening in that game, how many turnovers there's been, how hard it is to get down there. So I agree. Just trust the game flow, trust your gut. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that. He's definitely not the worst. There's some really bad coaches of making just dumb decisions at dumb times. I mean, we just saw a guy make the national championship, and he's made dumb decisions consistently in Mario Cristobal. So Sark can definitely get there with his decision-making. He's definitely not on that lower tier. But I agree with you. Number 2 for me is red zone. We got better this year. I think we were in the 60s, but before it just kept going down. The highest, I believe we were in the somewhere between 10 to 20 his first year. Then it went down to 50. Then it went down to 90. And then his 4th year, guys, which was 2 years ago now, we were worse than Iowa in the red zone at scoring touchdowns. And that was when Iowa fans were complaining about how bad their offense was. Their offense did nothing. They were winning special teams with defense and or winning games with special teams and defense. So Texas had, I think last year, if you can just repeat that of being in the 60s, that's good enough. If you elevate, like we talked about, the penalties, which is going to be number 1 again on my list, and the running game, if those get better and you stay in the 60s in the red zone, I think that's good enough. So just stay up what you were last year. Don't regress to what you have been under Steve Sarkisian. Stay in the 60s.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be good enough. And this is where a guy like Derek Cooper comes into the mix, right? This is where a guy that looks really good running in between the tackles and maybe has a little bit more of that power back. You got to be able to run the football on those short yardage situations, something that even in the years where they put up great numbers in 23 and 24 offensively, that was a massive issue. On those 4th and 1s, they weren't able to get the push on the interior, and that's as much of an offensive line problem as it is anything else. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to have to run the football in the red area. You're going to have to just stay in front of the chains in the red area as best you can. That comes with penalties as much as anything else. So it's a all-encompassing thing is the red zone, and you should have the guys to do it, especially with someone like Cam Coleman out there and kind of a cheat code. But you're going to have to be able to run the football. If you can't run the football in between the tackles in the red zone, you're not going to be able to do much of anything in the red zone.
100%. What is your number 1?
Will the tough schedule kill them? I think this is a question you don't really want the answer to. You'd love for them to just kind of roll off and make this tough schedule look really easy, but it's a tough schedule. There's a lot of tough trips. You have obviously Ohio State coming to Athens or coming to Austin, but then you have at Tennessee, at LSU, at A&M, you have at Ole Miss, you have Red River. It's going to be a fight. There's going to be a lot of games that are going to come down to a couple of different plays. And you feel confident with Arch Manning being your guy. You feel confident with a lot of the playmakers you have, with the defense that you figure to have this upcoming season. But there's nothing that fully prepares you for Neyland at night or Baton Rouge and Death Valley at night. So it's going to be really tough. It's going to be really interesting to see how this how this team kind of reacts to it. And that Ohio State game is fascinating. We see so many different teams canceling their tough games going, even Alabama canceling an Ohio State game going forward, because what's the utility in playing those games? Now, we'll see if Texas is able to play within 3 points. Now, you don't want to figure this out, but could they get in at 9-3? I guess they could, but and you'd love to be able to handle your business. It's a really tough schedule. So you could play good football and end up being 9-3 and be a really good team and feel relatively okay about what you did. But at the end of the day, they're going to see 9-3, and that's about it. So if you run you run into at LSU at night, you lose to Ohio State, that's all that matters. You lost those 3 games. It's going to be a really, really tough one to figure out. Hopefully you won't have to figure it out. Hopefully it will not kill them, but it is a schedule that has the ability to get a really good team not looking really good at times.
Yeah, and we just done a really bad job in general of college football treating schedules as 100% equal. We don't weight really good wins and close losses versus really good teams the same as, wins versus bad teams and so on and so forth. It's frustrating to see, but it is what it is, and we're going to get these games canceled until someone figures out to either fix the schedule to make them all even or to actually weight these things, because a loss versus Ohio State by 3 is much better than beating UTEP by 55 points. And guess what? One says a win, one says a loss. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care.
And the other small piece about the schedule is you play at Tennessee, then you have your bye week, then you play 8 straight games. So by the time you get to an at Texas A&M game that is going to have all the energy in the world, that's your 8th straight game in 8 weeks. It's going to be a battle, and they're going to have to find a way to get through it. And you have LSU towards the end of the season as well. So it's a fight. I think this team is good enough to get through it. I think both of us picked them to at least go. But it's a schedule that can get them a couple of times if they're not careful.
Yeah, I agree. Number one for me is penalties, and I'm just going to keep hammering this point home of, I talked about the last, 12 college football playoff national championship teams and where they ranked, and like the worst one I believe was LSU, and they were 72nd. And last year, guys, Texas was 135th out of 136 teams. You're not winning a national championship if you replicate that next year. You're going to have to jump up because the average is somewhere between 45 to 60. You're going to have to be in the top 60. And Texas hasn't done that in 3 years. So can Texas improve? It's kind of the same thing with what you were talking about when we really needed. And I've been complaining about this for a while of when we really need that 1 or 2 yards versus a quality opponent, we don't get it. When we really need to stay in 3rd and 3 and just stay there so we can actually accomplish the goal, we don't. We jump, we have a false start or some other procedural penalty that pushes us back and makes it harder on the quarterback. And Arch may be able to overcome those things in certain games, but if you're doing that consistently, that is going to get you beat. That is why the teams like Indiana, Michigan, Ohio State over the past couple of years, if you look, they're all in the top 20 of the least amount of penalties committed, because when you're on schedule, when you're just doing the little things right, it's much easier to win games consistently. You might be able to win a one-off game where you have 70, 80 yards of penalties, but you're not winning 16 of those games. It's not going to happen. And that's what it's going to take to win a national championship. So you have to be better consistently with the penalties, with the run game, with the red zone. Those are like the 3 main things. If they get 2/3 of that fixed, this team can win a national championship. If they don't, they're not going to.
Yeah, no, I think the reality of this football team is if they are healthy and they do not beat themselves, they're going to be a really, really hard team to keep from that game in Las Vegas. So at the end of the day, you look at this team and they have the receivers. They have a quarterback that I believe is top 3 in the country going into next year. You have an offensive line that looks much improved from a year ago. You have a defense that as far as I'm concerned, as long as you stay healthy at linebacker, you'll be top 10 in the country. I have very few doubts about that. So just don't beat yourself. Steve Sarkisian, just don't force at some points when in the past you might have. Don't take those 3 points when you might have tried to go for 7, or offensive linemen, just be a little bit more calm on the edges of the line of scrimmage. You feel more confident about the experience you have there now than you did a year ago, but it's always going to be a question mark until you get rid of it. So it's the biggest thing. It's the thing that every single team, when you come into a season, you never think about it until you see it every single play in those critical positions. It's happened to Texas a number of times over the last couple of years. They got to find a way to get it fixed. And I think they're capable of it. And I think if they don't beat themselves, again, it's going to be really, really hard for just about, especially defense, any defense to stop this offense, really.
No, 100%. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know your biggest question marks with Texas going into the 2026 season. We really appreciate you guys doing that. Jackson Johnson here. What's up, Longhorn Nation? Jackson, we really appreciate you being here. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. This was the 89th edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We will be back here next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Matthew. He's Tommy. And as always, hook 'em.